Hello, I'm Debbie Goddard from the Community Support Network at WIHD here in Westchester. And today with me is Audrey Brutus, who is the Cultural Responsive Education Specialist at the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. And I invited Audrey to speak with us today because in this time of the coronavirus, when so many of our kids are scattered and in their homes and not as a collective in the classroom, I wanted to talk to her a little bit about the inequities that are facing them and how, in some small way, we can kind of try to bridge that gap. So, Audrey, I wanted to start a little bit with what do you see as one of the most glaring things? I know in a conversation prior to this, we talked about how it's just a different form of inequity that we generally see in schools, but now it's just transplanted into a different environment. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So before I start, I just wanted to just make one small correction that I'm actually the Cultural Responsive Education Specialist with the Regional Partnership Center, and we're housed at PNW BOCES. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. But as far as what you're bringing up, this topic of inequities with this whole moving to online learning, it's a very big piece. And as I was sharing with you before, it's a continued conversation of the inequities that we see already in education across, different ethnic groups, socioeconomic status, a variety of different inequities. And it's just something that's now translating into this new version of education that we're seeing. It hasn't gone away or gotten better. Specifically, when you think about what's required in order for children to be able to participate in learning now, you're talking about having a computer or an iPad or some sort of device that can access technology in the home. And even if you do have a device, you have to also have online access in your house. So you have to be paying for the internet. So you're talking about some financial resources that have to be available. You're also talking about, there's a presumption that parents are involved in this as well. They not just put your kid in front of the computer. I mean, if they're older, maybe, but we're talking about younger kids, they still need the support of their parents. And if you have parents who have their education status or their level of education is not that high, this is difficult for them to be able to help their students and work through this with them. So that becomes an inequity as well, whereas before, regardless of your socioeconomic status or your education level, you can send your children to school and know at least for those hours, they could be exposed to certain things and there's someone there who is equipped to help them with this stuff. But now these kids don't have that access, and that is really falling on parents who, some of whom have to really decide between survival and supporting their children with online learning. When I say survival, meaning I can't not go to work, because if I don't go to work, the people under this roof are not going to eat today. Or, I know that, utility companies are really being understanding and not turning off the lights, turning off the water and things like that, which I think is really great that they're supporting different families during these times. But there are other realities that are there, such as food, shelter, things like that are more of a priority than this online learning for a lot of families. So that further deepens this inequity for these children, because it's like, who's making sure that they're learning, and that piece is very, it is a great topic that you bring up, because I was definitely thinking about that as well, of all these children who are not participating in education and are not participating in learning, not because their parents don't value it and don't want them to do, but because it's just not something that they can do or have access to.
Right. So what do you think are some of the ways that perhaps teachers can support those families? Because, they are part of the school community, and the schools do have some responsibility to make sure that everybody under these circumstances are getting educated to some degree. So is there anything that you think teachers might be able to do, or administration, to sort of support them in some way?
Well, first I want to really give high accolades and acknowledgments to teachers and administrators who have, without much guidance or much support in this whole world of online learning, really did what they had to do and are doing the best that they can to support all students. So I think that that's a very fantastic endeavor, and that they're doing that as best as they could. I can't even judge them at all.
Right.
So with that said, I was, sharing with you a conversation that I was having with a colleague of mine, and she's a teacher and, in a school district that has a lot of challenges, financial challenges, education challenges, and things like that. And she was sharing how one of her students contacted her through her online class that she has set up and was asking her what time is the bathroom break and what time is snack, and we were kind of laughing about it and how cute it was, but in reality, it made me think about how much structure is important to children and how much they crave that, how even in their homes, and they're there with their parents who are clearly in charge, and you can literally go to the bathroom whenever you want, but they needed that from the teacher to continue that level of structure that they had with her in school to still have it now at home. So, that really made me think of how important it is that no matter what platforms we're using with our students, to incorporate some level of structure there for the student, whether it's just, I'm going to call you at, 1 o'clock every other day or every day, just to check in to see how you're doing, or meet me online if you have access, meet me online at this time and this is what we're going to do. That level of having a schedule and having some sort of structure is very important to them. And I think that's something that shouldn't be lost as much as possible in this time.
So that's something parents probably can incorporate into the daily lives where possible too for the students, right? If you wake up at 8 o'clock, we'll have breakfast and then we'll do homework and then we'll do our lessons. And then, so at least they know sort of what's happening every day and it has the same rhythm to some degree that it had in school.
Absolutely. This is not just for teachers, it's also for parents. I think as much as possible, if they can have like a visual schedule for their kids, just like it's in school, your children have on their boards at 8 a.m. Breakfast, 8:10 math, whatever. The schedule is there visual for them, so they're already kind of used to that. So if you can manage to get a poster paper, or even if it was like a sheet of loose leaf and you created a schedule that you kind of put on the fridge that the children can refer to and see for themselves, that would be helpful. But I also understand that the tricky thing is for parents who work and they're also having to work from home, that you can have a schedule there, but the schedule doesn't just become for them, it's also for you, know, and you have to be available to implement that. And I get that that's a very big challenge. And it's very difficult for a lot of families, which furthers this piece of inequity as well. Yeah.
So what else can parents do? I mean, if you don't have access to a computer and you're at your home, what are some of the other things that you can possibly do? I mean, the library, which historically has always been a really great place for parents to go, and an equalizer to some degree, even that is no longer available. So what can parents do at home to kind of help to fill that gap a little bit?
Well, I know that some school districts are taking into account that not everybody has access to the computer and have been creating like packets, like paper and pencil packets. That
very old school, which is great for those who can't come up with the computer,
Right. So I know they've been setting up like pickup areas where parents can come and kind of pick those up. But, the other piece of that as well is if I'm a parent and I have a 5th or 6th grade education, it's hard for me to help my middle schooler or even my elementary student with this kind of piece. But, at least gives them some sort of access to the material. But it's very difficult, to support them if that's, the level that you're at. But as far as other things that parents can do, like just everyday things that you were originally doing, to incorporate that into like a teachable moment. If you're cooking, guess what? This could become a culinary lesson.
Absolutely.
Where you're involving them in that. If you're, you're going outside you can actually go out on like nature walks, like just go outside and like just pay more attention to things that are part of the neighborhood and part of the environment, and explore things more. Just think about like anything that you're already doing during your day. How can you turn this into a teachable moment? Maybe while you're cooking, you might have your child read you book out loud, you know, just as you're cooking, so that at least they're getting their reading time in.
Right. Or even following a recipe, maybe helping you measure out
right.
ingredients, right? That's
Just reading in that, measurement,
That's
math,
good.
all of that, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a definite opportunity to kind of engage in like your everyday, like living kind of skills and incorporate that into education. So I think those things shouldn't be lost. You shouldn't stop doing those things because you can't.
Right.
So how do you make those things a learning experience for your kids, you know?
So now for our population, which is kids with special needs, this is even compounded even more. What are some tips that you think will be helpful for parents with special needs kids who are even more probably overwhelmed by this whole process?
Right. I think that parents, especially your students who have disabilities, should not lose contact with those teachers and the related service providers in the schools who, as I understand, have recently gotten more information about how to service children in the homes, as far as virtually and things like that. So I'd recommend that they really keep in contact with these providers who are consistently working with their children every single day, for support for themselves, and also to get a sense of what is this child already used to in their educational environment, to get support on how to replicate that for them in the home. Granted, you know, you're not a physical therapist, you're not an occupational therapist per se, like in your home, but maybe they have modified versions of what they were already doing that they can help you kind of include in your home. Again, that would have to happen on a structured kind of schedule. I think the structure and the schedule piece is a very important part to kind of keep this going for students in home across the board, whether you have disabilities or not. I think everybody will need that. And parents have to really maneuver and figure out a way to make that happen as best as possible, because that'll make their life easier. It may not seem that way, but it will. It make your life easier and the life of your kids easier. Because when you're kind of doing things whenever you feel like it, or if you can, that inconsistency becomes a place of unstructuredness for everybody, and then it'll turn into chaos, and that's what you don't want. Right. So I really would stress that piece for families.
Yeah, I mean, the onus is now so much on parents. It feels like, oh my God, I'm now a cook, I'm now a teacher, I'm now a physical therapist, I'm now a herder, because you have all these different kids with different needs, plus you're expected for some parents to be able to also do your work at home. I mean, I'm thinking something's got to give, right? How do you manage that balance? How do you decide what's going to be a priority, and what is the most important for your family? And I think at some level, you kind of have to decide for your family, this is what I can do today.
Right.
And perhaps focus on that and not try to be everything to everyone, because that is impossible.
And because, you know, by trade, I'm a psychologist. Mm-hmm. Before I was a culturally responsive education specialist. And from a psychologist perspective, you know, what I would say to educators is to just keep this piece in mind, that for some people, this time, there are certain families that were already in survival mode, you know, and they were really just focused on, when we talk about Abraham Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, you know, there's a pyramid where at the very bottom of that pyramid is like your safety and food and like survival needs. Those needs have to be met first before you can do anything else. And education, unfortunately, is higher up on that pyramid than those basic needs. Mm-hmm. So if you think about these families that were struggling with meeting these basic needs while their children were in school, this is compounded more so now. And if you can really just keep that in mind when you're kind of creating assignments and giving work online, to not inundate these families with this, because it's hard. So whereas maybe, yes, if they were there in school all day long, you would have done all of this work, but they're not, you know? So maybe you're just assigning one reading assignment, and you're just kind of going over one writing piece and one math piece, as opposed to an extensive amount of work. And also consider that some families have multiple children.
Right.
Imagine if you have, right, and different grade levels and things like that. This is very much overwhelming. So if you can kind of limit how much assignments you're giving, and, you know, just think about the fact that you have parents who are working, parents at different educational levels that might not be able to help, and how overwhelming this must be for them. to keep that in mind when you're assigning these assignments, and to not give things that are so taxing on the families, because it's a lot. And I also get for the teachers piece, they're under a lot of pressure to show that they're doing something, that they have some learning. But if there was a way to still do what the state is needing for you to do as far as assigning work and meeting with the children and doing that piece, but not inundating the parents by assigning 5 assignments and they have 3 or 4 kids at home. You're talking about 20 assignments that have to be done.
Right.
A lot, you know.
That is definitely,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Audrey, for sharing these tips. Any last takeaway that you think, I mean, just for the adults in this situation and all the kids who are now scattered from their classmates, is there any idea you think of how they might be able to reach out to each other and communicate so they know that eventually they will see their friends again and this will all be okay?
Right. I know that many of our children were not born yet before we had the internet and things like that. But there was a way that we did this where we interacted with one another. Believe it or not, we used to interact with each other and not be on the internet or on social media. So this is really going to force us to get back to bone basics of where you might have to actually pick up the phone and call somebody, or you might have to if you need to meet up with someone, I mean, granted, you have to do social distancing, but if you were at a park and you're like on that side, and that's, at least we're seeing each other, but we're far apart from each other, but we see each other, we can speak to each other or whatever. But yeah, you might have to go back to how it used to be, where you used to have to pick up the phone and call people to see how they're doing.
That old class phone list out, if it still exists, and see if
right.
Reach out and
we used to do this, guys. We'll be fine. This is gonna get a lot worse before it gets better. Yeah. We have to ride this out, but it will get better. This is not sustainable. It can't stay in this space forever. So we might have to get back to the basic way of staying in contact. Okay. And that's okay.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
Useful tips.
Debbie, thank you.
It's much appreciated. Again, I'm Debbie Goddard at the Community Support Network at WIHD. This will be on Facebook. You can make a comment at the bottom and leave a question. If we can't answer it, we will certainly get to you to Dr. Audrey Brutus, and she can fill in some further blanks for us. Again, thank you so much and be safe. Bye-bye.
Be safe, everyone.